Hi, Ryan. Hi, Julia.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Can you hear me okay?
I can. We'll give people a minute or two to log in.
Sure.
How's your week been?
Going okay. A little nervous about the exam, but other than that, it's going okay.
Okay.
Ready, ready to shoot the video. Done my practicing, so.
Great.
Going well. Yourself? How are you? Everything okay?
Oh, I'm good. Sorry, your I think your mic is hitting something, so it's a little hard to understand you sometimes.
These are crummy headphones.
That might be easier. Busy, hectic, but otherwise good. Yeah. Well, I say we dig in. Julia, are you there?
Oh, yes.
Hi, how are you?
Hello. Hi, Ryan.
It's nice to see you.
Hey, how are you, Julia?
So, what can I do for you guys?
Ladies first.
Oh, well, I had kind of a logistical question.
Sure.
Is it possible for us to see our answers to the assessments, like the previous assessments?
No. You can, well, yes and no. Before the exam goes live, so tomorrow, if you want to make an appointment with me to go through it again, it might be a little tight because it's a little close to the deadline. But yeah, the assessments are by appointment.
Okay.
I do that because I've had assignments be posted to the web. And so when that happens, I have to make all new assignments. And so I keep a firm grip on my assessments so that they will not find their way onto the web.
Oh, okay.
Not that I don't trust you guys, but it only takes one person to do it. And then I'm rewriting tests. Yeah. And they get vetted. I mean, those questions get, those questions have gone before, more than 100 students. So they've been fine-tuned over the time, and I would hate to lose them.
Okay. Just wondering.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I do recommend though reading the feedback, the whole class feedback from the assessments. There's a ton of good information there.
Okay.
All right. Well, I definitely have some questions about some of the diacritics. I didn't. For some of them, it just seems like there aren't examples, and I saw in the study guide that there's going to be like some disordered speech. So again, I'm just for some of the diacritics, I'm just not like I don't always really know what I'm looking for, especially dentalized. So if you could maybe just give me some like examples of dentalization,
sure.
Aspirated, unaspirated stops, things like that.
Sure. So dentalized just means that something that isn't typically made on the teeth gets made on the teeth. Okay. So in typical speech, when we do one of the alveolar sounds, so the alveolar ones would be t, d, n, l. And you can already see my tongue tip goes up behind my upper front teeth to the alveolar ridge, right? And And then if I were to use an interdental, like they or this, that touches the upper teeth. So humans always try to save time and energy. And so as soon as we start to say something like, oh, can they go? What we figured out is we have a choice. The N is here and the teach is here. And humans go, can I move one of those to the other spot? And here's the choice. So if I move the TH back, I get can they. Can they do that? Can they? Some people do that. For me, that's too much of a substitution. So what many people do is they move the N to the teeth. It doesn't cause that much of a difference acoustically. So you get, instead of can they, we do can they. We just move the N to the teeth, and then we do the TH, and it's a piece of cake. And it happens all the time, like for a million question forms, like would they, could they, should the, could the. We do it all the time. Okay. It can happen in distorted speech, like Thuthi. Thuthi, the really nice girl, and she helped me with my homework and things like that. So now I'm moving S and Z to the teeth. That's not typical.
Okay. That was great. Thank you.
Aspirated. The thing that I really, let me tell you, this is, I think, important. In English, we have parameters, like the whole point of phonemes is that they just have to be different. We have to be able to tell them apart so that we can build words. So, we can have words like pin, which is a metallic needle for sewing, and bin, which is a plastic box that you put junk in. And so those are made almost identically, except for voicing, right? And so we need that parameter so that we can tell those are different words. Otherwise, words all start sounding the same, okay? So the problem is that it's not always super robust. So I'll give you a couple examples. Okay, so if I do these again, and I force myself, I'm going to do my best, to make the voicing distinction, but not add aspiration. Ready? Bin, 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 bin. They sound really close, right?
Yeah.
So that's a problem. So humans went, is there something else we could do? The voicing is really not resonating there. What else could we do? Like, well, why don't we just do a big puff of air on the first one? So we go pin, bin. So to make the voicing more robust, we've added this extra little piece. Now, aspiration by itself in English is not contrastive. So I could have pin, and I could also have pin, and that's never going to make a new word. But it's a phonetic cue that I use to let you know that there is a difference in voicing. It's just a hint. We're cheating. And what's amazing is that we do this all subconsciously, that English speakers don't know they're doing it, and yet they all do it consistently. And that's just for the voiceless stops. So we add aspiration to voiceless stops, pataka. Now, if we do it at the end of the word, let's see, let's do this. All right, so here are two more words. We have cap, which is a hat with a brim. And then we have cab, which is a vehicle that can be hired to take you around. okay? Again, now, if I force myself just to only make them different just in voicing, ready? And I'm not going to release them because at the end, we don't have to release stops at the end. So I could have cap, cab, cap, cab. They start getting really close, right? So what humans do is we go, all right, so what can I do to make that final voicing difference bigger? Because it's a stop. So stops are quick. They're released all at once. And in this case, they're not released at all. So you don't get a whole lot of voicing to hold on to. So what we've started doing is we make the vowel short before a voiceless stop. And then we just make it really long before the voice stop. So we go cap and cab.
Okay.
And then you go, oh, the voicing is so clear in that second one. No, it really wasn't. I just lengthened the vowel. I was cheating. And yet we all do it constantly.
Okay. Excuse me for my expression, but this is kind of like the realm of chapter 6 stuff. This is kind of like acoustics. That's kind of what you're doing right here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's acoustics, and it's also, well, it's also sort of narrow transcription. It's like allophones, because it resides in our brain. It's not just, I mean, yes, technically everything we do is sort of acoustics, because as soon as it leaves our mouth, it's acoustics to transmit. But this is a subconscious rule that resides in our mind. And if I gave you some random word that doesn't exist, so what does that say?
Blurs.
Blurs. And what does this one say?
Blurs.
Yeah, and you just lengthen the vowel. Blurs. You made the vowel longer. And you've never said that word probably ever in your life because I made it up just now. So you have these rules that you apply. And that's the thing about allophones. They're predictable. So even when we make up words, people do them. They're predictable by their phonetic environment. It's really cool. I mean, it's just really cool.
All right. Julie, do you have another question?
Yeah, so it actually kind of relates to the example you just gave of the two words. But I realized a problem that I had, especially with the accented English assignments, was distinguishing the S and Z phonemes. And I know that like the S occurs before the voice, like when the final sound is voiceless, and the Z occurs when the final sound is voiced. But in some cases, that's not true, especially for accented English. So I was wondering if there's a way to distinguish which one.
It's hard. In accented English, and you'll find I tend to be more lenient for accented English with a different L1. There aren't too many English L1 accents that completely devoice at the ends of words. We do, and it also is weird because we do this other weird thing. That when the word, so the S and Z rule only applies to the morpheme ending, because phonemes are not predictable, but morphemes are. And because this is being added onto a word and is a morpheme, it's predictable. In the middles of words, S and Zs are not predictable. I mean, the word could have been music, but it just isn't. So we've got this ending, and if it comes at the end of the utterance, the next thing we have is silence. And because it's silence at the end, sometimes we do co-articulation And we borrow some of the voice, we devoice because the silence is voiceless. It's nothing, right? So what we do is we go pencils. And what we do is, it's not completely voiceless, but what we do is our voice starts and then we know we're going to have silence. So our voicing just sort of stops midway. Pencils. So the first half of the Z is voiced and the second half of the Z isn't voiced. It turns into an S. It's like this SZ mix. And so we show that with just the diacritic, saying it's partially devoiced. We also can do that in the blends, like in please. And there we have something that's not supposed to exist in English, voiceless L, please. So my voice is off and then it starts turning on here. So midway through L, suddenly my voice turns on. It's like a little lazy, just a little co-articulation, just saving some time and energy. So I want you to know that for English with English dialects with English as the L1, I'm way more flexible on accented English because there's just so much leeway. I mean, you do your best, you train your ear and you continue to train your ear, and then you represent it as closely and precisely as you can. I'm not going to have you do any foreign speaker transcription on the exam. None.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I guess my question was, how much do we have to, like, in terms of like, I know one of them is like the like Northeast dialect was one of the ones you had on the study guide. How much should we just memorize sort of the patterns, or what exactly?
No, I mean,
how prepared should we be for that?
You know, listen, it's good to know some of those, to have them in your back pocket. What I have found in my life, because, you know, before I taught phonetics, I was doing cued speech, and cued speech is broad transcription with your hand. And so we get training in how to show accents and dialects. There's a whole set of courses for transliterators who learn that. It's called transphonation, okay? And it's hard, just like you had to go through that process of like, what am I hearing? What are they doing? Or I know it's something different. I can't put my finger on, but I can tell it's something. I like to say it gives you that, the feeling where you just go, your ear's trying to hint at you like, hey, something is odd. I'm not going to make you do a bunch of systematic patterns. You're going to need them, I mean, for life. Your ability to start detecting patterns will help you forever. That's what speech therapists do. That's just exactly what we do. If there are dialectal differences, I mean, they're hard to avoid because I have to pick a dialect, right? I mean, anything I record has to be pronounced some way. So I'm always picking a dialect, right? So there will be examples of dialectal differences because they're unavoidable. You know, if I say the word caught, I picked a vowel. I could have said caught. I mean, I have to pick a vowel. So be ready to listen and detect differences, but I'm not going to make you transcribe sections according to a specific dialect that you've memorized. Okay. It'll be instances. So there is sentence transcription on the final. Okay. It's, you know, they're short. You know, I don't think any of them are 10 words long. Okay. So it's more like 5 or 6 words. And it's just to make sure you can detect some of the differences. You can detect reduced vowels. It tends to be some of the big stuff. Okay. I mean, reduced vowels are important. I mean, it's really how English speakers talk. Thanks.
have a really specific question.
Go for it.
Again, going back to the accented English assignment, there were some that for the word grandfather, there were some accents that use the dentalized D for the father, the father.
Really? Grand.
No,
father?
grandfather, not the in
Oh,
grand.
for the TH,
Yes.
TH,
Yeah.
like grandfather.
Right.
Wait, no, dentalized
No?
TH is just, it's not dentalized because it's
Oh.
already dental. It's interdental. You can't dentalize a TH because it's already there.
Oh, dentalized D in place of the TH, I think.
Okay, so that does make sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And the reason why you can do that is because what you're trying to basically, there's two ways you could look at it. You could say you're doing a D on your teeth, or you could say you're stopping the TH, which we don't really have a symbol for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So
that's why we do that. So it'd be like grandfather, grandfather.
right.
It's hard to say.
So I was wondering how to distinguish a dentalized D and an alveolar tap.
I don't know that you can from listening, and it's too precise. I would never make you do that. You can hear subtle differences, like grandfather and grandfather. It'll sound a little bit different, but I wouldn't make you do that. Just like I don't make you guys distinguish between a glottal stop at the end of a word and an unreleased T at the end of a word. They do sound different, but it's very subtle. I think that's something you should work toward. Things like what and what, what. They do sound different, but there's not a lot to be gained from that difference.
Okay.
I mean, I do it when I transcribe, I make that difference, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. Both are acceptable.
I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions this weekend. But
The only thing though is when does the exam go live? Doesn't it go live tomorrow?
mhm.
Yeah. So when the exam goes live, I
Right, I
can't
can't-
answer any more questions.
Yeah, that was why I said it like that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. I'm getting there, but I have a lot more studying to do for sure.
What are the parts where you feel the least confident?
Some of the things I already discussed, definitely like disordered speech and what's going on. I remember there's like an exercise in the book of disordered speech, and I didn't do well on it at all. And
Well, it's hard.
that's sort of one of them. Just sometimes what's going on in connected speech. I think I'm getting better, especially after all the transcribing I did over, the past week. But still, I kind of, sometimes I'm not sure exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah. In all of chapter 6, like the acoustic stuff with the charts and the syllabus, like that stuff is, yeah.
So let's tackle some of that. So with disordered speech, phonological processes, you should absolutely study and be able to do. Those are on the exam and they're heavily weighted, okay?
Yeah.
Don't do them in your head. Have scrap paper next to you, okay? Go through the steps, think, what did I expect?
Yep.
What did I get? What changed? And then write the place, manner, and voice, and that will tell you the answer.
Okay.
Don't try to do it in your head. It's not for the end exam. And eventually, when you're on the job, you'll start doing it in your head.
Okay. I hope so.
Yeah. So that's super important. And remember that, when you check yourself, when you do place, manner, and voice and compare, you'll also easily see when two things change. And that means two processes are at play. So you've got to be ready for that. There won't be more than two, but there may be two.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
The other bit, acoustics. Now, you know, what am I going to make you do? You should be able to look at a sinusoid without the axes labeled and know what the axes are supposed to be. And they're different between like a sinusoid waveform and a spectrogram. And I remember the moment when I sort of got this. I remember I was at Emerson undergrad with Dr. Bajaj. So if you have a sinusoid, what is this axis?
That frequency.
Let me find the page for you too. I mean, it's very logical, right? So let's start with this one. This is the most obvious. What's this axis?
That time.
Yeah, it has to be time because it's traveling. Anytime we travel, we have to have time involved. If you think about it, like if you get up and walk, but you don't account for time, it would be a photograph of you walking.
Okay.
Because it's one moment in time. If you want to walk, you've got to have a video so that you can see where were you at this second, where were you at this second. That's basically what this is doing. Where is the wave at each second or millisecond? Okay. And then that tells us what the distance between these waves. So if this is time, what is this showing?
Is it the space between sounds or?
Yeah, what do we call that with how fast it
Rate?
happens in time?
The rate?
Yeah, what do we hear that as? There's another term for it.
Intensity? No.
So if think about something that vibrates fast, what does that sound like?
High.
Yeah, this is pitch. This is, well, what we perceive as pitch. Whenever it's actually measured out in real life, it's frequency. Pitch is really in our head because pitch is really rate and we hear it as high, but it's really just fast. We just don't call it fast. Like, ooh, that sound was fast. All right. And then, so that leaves one thing left. What is this axis? So we have time, which shows us frequency. What was that, Julia?
Intensity.
Intensity, how loud the sound is. So it could be a little sound, or it could be a great big sound with big intensity, lots of energy. And again, we hear that as volume, but it's really just energy, how much energy it has. Which is why we get loud when we use a lot of air, because air is our fuel. So if I push more air out, I get louder because it's just making the intensity, it's more energy. Okay, so that's important. Now then we get to spectrograms. We've got a different story. If you want to like look on with one, they're around page 172. All right, and it's different. So again, so now we've got these like The graph looks weird and different, right? What is this?
Also time.
Also time, because it's moving. It's the video playing. Okay. Now the one that's different is this one.
That's frequency.
This is frequency. And I don't know if this is going to resonate with you, but I remember the moment, because intensity is shown here. How is intensity displayed now? Because it's not a waveform that gets really big.
Is it shading?
It's the shading. So the way I like to think of it is it's almost like this is a waveform of these waves, but you're over top looking down at the waveform.
Okay.
And it gets darker as it gets more intense, and it's getting closer to you. It gets darker. And when it's softer, it's faded, it's lighter. Okay. That's the kind of stuff you should absolutely be able to know and do. You should be able to look at a spectrogram and know the landmarks. I don't expect you to be able to read a spectrogram. I can't read a spectrogram reliably. I mean, I can recognize what type of sound it is. I can recognize the class of sound, but I can't read words from a spectrogram.
Okay.
There's another little bit of that I wanted to say. What was it? We talked about the formats, and like there was a question on one of the quizzes about when the tongue is high, F1 does this.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
can memorize that if you want. It's one way to go. If you understand it, you would be able to make that chart almost on your own. Let me show you what I mean. I remember like when someone explained this to me, because like when I was a student, I just memorized it. I was like, okay, F1 is, like one of them is inverse, one of them is positively. And then I was like, oh, and if I change the wording, I can make them both be inverse. Like I made it easy for me to remember, right?
Mm.
And then, let's see if I can do this. All right. So we have a human being, and how do we model the vocal tract? How is it modeled? How is it always described acoustically? What kind of tube? No sweat. Listen, I was an interpreter at MIT for about 7 years, interpreting a speech and hearing PhD program. And so I had to interpret this about 4 bazillion times. It is a bent tube, okay? Because our mouth goes like this, and then our trachea goes like this. And it's important because a bent tube has certain acoustic properties that a straight tube doesn't, okay? Now, our tongue is here, and it can move around. And what we have is basically, we end up with like 2 chambers that are separated by our tongue, okay? And chambers resonate differently. Like if you think about a glass and you lick your finger and you go like this and it goes ee. And if you change the amount of water, it'll change the rate at which it vibrates. So if you fill up more water, it'll go ee. And if you get rid of some of water and it's emptier, it'll go ooh. So now let's apply that. Here, this space is F1. Would you say that this is bigger or smaller than this part? And it extends. I need a bigger dry erase board. F1 is bigger than this area, which is F2. Okay, so in general, well, let's start here. Which, again, just like the glasses that are filled with water, if it's emptier and bigger, more empty space, will it resonate at a higher frequency or lower frequency?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. So if you have a chamber that is mostly empty and big and empty, will it resonate high frequencies or low?
Low.
Low. And the easy way to think about that is just a giant. Like the bigger the giant, the fee, fi, fo, fum, and the smaller, you get like a little bug. It's going to be higher pitch. Okay. So, and it relates to the same thing with like the strings on a violin, the less mass, the higher the pitch. So F1 typically is going to be lower frequencies than F2. Okay. And if you look at the chart, there's a chart somewhere. Yeah. So let's do one. This will be fun. And you can see, if you look at the chart, look at the frequencies. The F1s all the way across are much lower frequency than the F2s. The F2s are all much higher. That's just because F2 is small. That's why. So when you look at that chart, it just seems like random numbers. That's like some hieroglyphic. Like, what am I supposed to make of that, right? But now let's make it make total sense. All right, so now the tongue is going to move forward to make E, right? So that's a high front vowel. So the tongue is going to go way up, high, forward. What just happened to F1?
Lots of space.
Lots of space. So F1 is going to do what?
It's going to be lower.
It's going to be really low. And F2 just, is it bigger or smaller now?
Tiny.
Way tiny. So it's going to go way high. If you look at that chart, you'll see that the F2 for E is the highest value. That's just because it's the smallest space for that vowel, because the tongue just crammed it all up. There's hardly any room. So the only area that gets to vibrate is this. So it's going to vibrate at a high frequency. If we then say, okay, well, what about ooh? What's going to happen there?
The F1 is going to be higher and the F2 is going to be lower.
Ta-da! And now you have what's called an intuition. You can do it in your head. It'll just make sense. You don't need to memorize a chart. You don't have to memorize some weird random rule that some author says in a book. It just makes sense. Nice job. So that's the kind of stuff I want you to know for acoustics. And honestly, I don't know that there's that much more. I mean, you know the basics. Know the basics. I do want you to know things like, and I just mean ballpark, like dB. What ballpark range would be somebody talking? What ballpark range would be someone whispering? What ballpark range would cause physical pain? I don't expect you to know like really precise numbers, but you should know that 15 dB isn't going to deafen you. Okay. I know I put a nice graphic somewhere in the course that actually has like pictures of objects, but I'm sure that the author something somewhere, probably at the beginning of the chapter. It comes in, it is clinically relevant because when you look at an audiogram, which is a depiction of how someone hears, you can look at what frequency, for each frequency, how loud does it have to get before they detect it? That's what an audiogram shows. So you want the detection to be actually really low dB, so that shows that they hear with acuity. But if they have like a high dB on a certain frequency, that means they don't hear it until it's really loud. Okay, so Know that kind of stuff. That's really clinically relevant, and knowing things like the speech banana and stuff like that. In audiology, you're going to have to know it with precision. For phonetics, I just want you to have some ballpark stuff to work with. And as you get older, your high frequencies require more intensity, as mine do.
That was so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. I think if there's anything else I can think of. And the feedback is a big one, because I mean, really, when you think about it, that's the whole point of the class. I check your skills and knowledge. And so if I see a pattern of error, I'm going to work really hard to make sure you guys get it. But then I have to test to see if it worked. I have to see if my teaching worked.
Trying to think. All right, so answer the question about dialect speech. That was a question I had. How would you recommend approaching the study guide aside from mastering everything?
I don't think you really have to master everything. I mean, you know, when I was a student, I used to make study guides for myself. And honestly, a lot of times just making the study guide was all. I didn't study it. I just made it. And the making of it was all I needed, right? And that's often the case. It gives you a structure for a refresher of what you might have forgotten, because we've been together for 14 weeks. It's easy to forget things, right? So you could use that just like that. And if you see something that you're like, I know that, then you don't need to type it out. You know, you don't need to like knock yourself out. It's just meant to be a way that if you read something and go, did we talk about that? Like if you have a, did we talk about that? Then you need to go back. And that's the thing. Use it as a trigger.
Okay.
I don't expect you to like fill all that out. Not at all. And I tend to be pretty practical on the final exam. I mean, you know, like I like to write questions where I give you a sentence and then I transcribe it for you like a bunch of ways. And I say, which one's the right one? And you have to commit to my transcription. But the thing that I like is like, you know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to keep it close. Like it's not going to come down to reduce vowels and stuff like that. I'm going to throw in common errors that I saw all semester, so that I want to make sure that people look and go, oh, wait a minute, is that the letter Y? Oh, is that a C in there? You know, that's the stuff, you know.
Okay, perfect.
I don't want to undersell it though. I don't want you to under prepare, but I do
I'm
try to
taking it very seriously, don't worry.
Okay, I do try to go for big, sort of the big takeaways. And the phonological processes are huge. I mean, that's our bread and butter.
Okay.
And so, you know, if you don't know placement or in voice, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be really hard to do that. And the other thing is, placement or in voice never goes away. You will know that in your head forever, and you will rely on it. At least good speech therapists do. Every once in a while, I hear I shouldn't say it like that, but every once in a while I hear about a speech therapist who says, oh yeah, you don't really need phonetics, you know, because their approach is I say it and then the child says it wrong and I go, listen and watch, and then I say it again. Okay, so right, you didn't need phonetics, but that kid sure wishes you had some phonetic knowledge because he's guessing, he's groping, and you're not giving any detailed feedback. So when I listen to a child pronounce things, I can tell if they're tensing or relaxing. I can tell where their tongue is by listening. So I can listen and go, why is their tongue in the back? So, and you'll start to be able to tell, like if I said, or you'll go, oh wait, something was weird. And then what you'll do as a newer person in this field is you'll start to imitate. So, and that's one of the best things you can do is not in front of the client, but on your own, you try to sound like them. So you try to talk like they talk and you go, what am I doing? So that you can tell them what not to do.
Okay.
And then you say, oh, their tongue is way far forward. If I say, but move my tongue forward, bus. That's what it sounds like when you move your tongue forward. And tensing will actually become easy. Like you'll really start to detect it. So if someone says, sit on the bus, it's like, ooh, tensing that first vowel.
In graduate school, what's the next step of phonetics beyond this introduction?
It's great. You do artic. So you go into articulation therapy, artic and phonology. So you take all the stuff we did. And the other thing is when you go in, at least my professor gave us a quiz right off the bat. So he said, write down the place, manner, and voice of all these consonants, and had everyone do like this little mini quiz. And then the professor who did that was also the one who hired me to do this. And he said, so I'm going to be checking your students to see how well they know this. I'm like, oh, great. Thank you. A lot of pressure on me. But what you'll do is from here, you then go into looking at the therapies that you can use. So you'll listen to disordered speech, you'll analyze it and transcribe it, but then you'll start doing treatment plans. We've only touched on it, like we did prioritizing goals. That was as far as we got, but that's pretty far. That's a nice chunk of getting ready for it.
I feel like I've learned so much from since day one to now. I feel like I've learned so much. It's amazing. So yeah.